Good evening. My name is Sandra Fritz. I'm the chairperson of the Shrewsbury School Committee. Welcome to our meeting of December 6th. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast live on Celco channels 29 and 329, and it's streamed live on Shrewsbury Media Connections website. I'd like to thank Liz Poplowski from SMC, who's assisting with our meeting this evening. First on the agenda is public participation. No one has asked to address the committee this evening. However, if anybody wants to join us in the future for this portion, please contact us at schoolcommittee@shrewsbury.k12.ma.us. Next is chairperson and members report. Ms. Boucher.
I had the pleasure of attending the winter concert at Shrewsbury High School last evening, and I just wanted to congratulate all of the student musicians and their teachers on an excellent series of performances. I know there's night 2 is tonight, and it's actually starting at 7:30, but it was well done. And I know there's a bunch of winter concerts. This is kind of that time of year, but just throughout the district, but really well done last night.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Next is superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, and want to congratulate those student musicians as well. I did want to mention I had the opportunity to be at Sherwood Middle School earlier this week for on Monday, and at the all grade level meetings, our students from the RISE program actually presented to our 5th and 6th grade students. They did a wonderful job talking about their program and about the new retail store, Maple and Main. That also had a very successful last Saturday evening, I understand, at the Yuletide Market. It was open, even the lighting ceremony on the Common. That continues to be a real highlight, and just another plug for the pop-up market they have tomorrow. So if you're watching this live on December 7th, Thursday, from 4:30 to 7:30, I believe, Maple and Main will be open. There'll be a variety of local merchants there selling their wares, and we encourage you to attend. I also wanted to mention that I did get a note today that yesterday 30 of our Shrewsbury High School students traveled to Olympus in Westboro along Route 9. It's a biomedical devices company. It was a STEM day. They explored a whole variety of elements relative to engineering, research and development, sales, marketing. They all received some sort of hands-on experience with a laparoscopic probe that Olympus manufactures. But we appreciate Olympus's partnership in providing that experience for our students. Kathleen Cohane, who is our Director of Development and Community Partnerships, led the way, and she reports that there's the feedback from the students was outstanding. Really gave them some insight into potential careers, and another good example of ways we are trying to strengthen our career awareness and hands-on opportunities for students and in-person opportunities to experience those kinds of things. So thank you to our partners at Olympus, and thank you to Kathleen for organizing that. And that is Superintendent's report this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Our first time scheduled appointment this evening is a safety and security audit report. The Shrewsbury Public Schools commissioned the Olson Group to conduct a comprehensive safety and security review for the district in October and November of 2023 to assess the safety and security of school buildings and internal safety protocols. At the meeting, representatives from the Olson Group tonight will summarize their report, which identifies both existing strengths and opportunities for improvement for our school district approach to safety and security. So we have with us Mr. Girardi, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, along with Mr. Zachary Pope. He's the Project Manager and Lead Planner from the Olson Group, and Eric Petrowski, who's the Support Associate and Site Assessor for the Olson Group. So welcome. Glad to have you here and go over this report with us.
All right, thank you. As mentioned, when we were planning the fiscal year 2024 budget, we felt it important to earmark some funds to conduct the comprehensive safety and security audit, again, to identify strengths that we have in district that we should keep moving on with our practices, and then identifying areas where we can make improvements to make sure that we are keeping current with our safety and security protocols. So with me tonight is Mr. Zachary Pope, Mr. Eric Petrowski. They are 2 members of the Olson Group whom we engaged back in September through a request for proposals plan where they came out as the group that we wanted to work with. We've spent the past 2 months with Zach and Eric and their team, and very happy with the relationship that we've built with them, and they are here tonight to share their findings. So welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you to the school committee and Chairwoman for that awesome introduction. I'm going to start a little bit to talk for those that are watching at home and those that are in the room with us. The Olson Group was started in 2005. We're a national Homeland Security and Emergency Management Safety and Security company. When we started in 2005, our current president and owner, Kyle Olson, was tasked by the federal government to support Hurricane Katrina efforts. And since then, over the last 17, almost 18 years, we have been supporting local school districts, institutions of higher education, local government, state government, and federal government in a variety of capacities, including assessments and audits in which we provided for you. Our presentation today, I'm going to introduce you to the project team, myself and Eric included. For those that are watching us, go over what the purpose and the scope of the audit was, talk a little bit about our methodology, specifically highlighting 2 items, give everybody a little crash course in a concept called crime prevention through environmental design, or CEPTED for short, and then talk about our findings. So from the Olson Group, we tasked 4 main folks, our core project team, myself as the project manager and lead planner here for Shrewsbury. My background, I have a master's in education and organizational psychology, and I've served as a director of safety and security for local school districts and institutions of higher education for the past 15 plus years, and I am a certified emergency manager with the International Association. I'll turn it to Eric here with me in person.
Hello everyone, Eric Petrosky. My background's in public health and emergency management. I have my Master of Public Health from George Washington, and I'm the project support lead, so a lot of the behind the scenes work with the interviews, surveys, working on the findings in the report, and et cetera, et cetera.
And our other 2 team members who were unable to join us tonight, but we're here on site, is Natalie Graver, our Vice President for Training and Exercise, who has a graduate certificate from the Naval Postgraduate School, which is the leading Homeland Security Emergency Management graduate institution. And Dr. William Spencer, who was also here on site with us, who has a doctorate in philosophy and Homeland Security, also a certified emergency manager, and spent a good bit of his career supporting school districts and institutions of higher education at the state level, both in Pennsylvania and Louisiana. As Mr. Girardi mentioned, you put out a request for a proposal, and the Olson Group responded to support you. And our purpose and scope in the project really was to engage the community throughout the process. We believe that it's a shared process and it is a shared outcome. We come in as a third party, neutral to everything that you're doing, to give you some thoughts and some eyes, but know that we're giving you a football to run down the rest of the football field at the end of the day. So having you make sure that you are engaged and you share in that outcome and that process is important to us. We also wanted to make sure that we highlighted a lot of the accomplishments. A lot of times you see audit reports come out from auditors in particular, and they're telling you all the things that you need to do better and all the things that you do bad. And we wanted to make sure that as part of our shared process that we highlight all of the accomplishments and the good things that you're doing in safety and security. And last but not least, are specifically around our areas for improvement and developing a shared and agreed upon area action plan for improvement. Those areas for improvement that we identify and we'll go into in detail are based on national industry best practices, what you have here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and elsewhere. And then we look at an action plan together with your project team to say, does this really kind of jive? Is this where you're wanting to head? And really kind of mesh that well with the findings. As we started engaging in the process and our timeline here, the contract award started in September, and we really hit the ground running. We wanted to make sure that we were able to meet the timeline to present to you today the findings. And so that started the day after the contract was awarded. Mr. Girardi and I were able to get everything moving fairly quickly at the end of September, and then moved into October, where Shrewsbury provided us with the bulk of your documents for us to review. team member who was not mentioned, that's one of our support team members, is Alicia Jones. Alicia, previous educator and safety and security professional for the District of Columbia Public Schools, reviewed all of your plans, policies, and procedures, and then provided an analysis for us there. From that, we conducted interviews with stakeholders. We identified those stakeholder groups based on our knowledge and history of doing this work, and also working with your project team of who's the most invested parties in that process. And last but not least, we spent a week here on site in lovely Shrewsbury. Had a great time. We learned that Mr. Girardi is quite the celebrity. We met every student that he has ever taught or been principal for, including his own children while we were on site. So it was definitely welcoming, and we appreciated the time that we had with y'all. November, we spent the time not only participating in our own Thanksgiving festivities, but pulling everything together, creating the infographic, which you have there on your dais for you, and that's passed around to the public and will be posted, but also pulling together your final report and your presentation for tonight. And leads us to the last but not least on the timeline, our presentation here for you. So our methodology has 4 main components in the assessment report. Those interviews with stakeholders and theming using qualitative analysis of what they were able to provide. We reviewed your panorama data. That's that data that students are responding to on the surveys. You get back, you see what you're doing good in terms of your peers, where you're kind of falling short, and your trends over time. We looked at your policies, plans, and procedures that Ms. Jones did, and then we used an on-site assessment methodology called crime prevention through environmental design. So we're going to give you a little bit of a crash course for those watching. Crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED, is built on 4 main principles and how we look at actual physical facilities. First, we start with what is the concept of natural surveillance. This is how we place physical features such as windows, lighting, and landscaping around your building. And the whole goal is, how do these features affect our ability to be seen by occupants or passerbyers? That's both to deter criminal activity, the crime part, and also to prevent other things from happening in terms of emergencies or threats that may come to the building. More eyes, more windows, you can see things, and it's also how we deploy staff. Is also in that natural surveillance. Our next topic in that CPTED framework is natural access control. This is our physical guidelines and how we use spaces, our comings and goings. This is the placement of entrances, fences, landscape, and lighting as well, but it's all how we engage in accessing the building or accessing individual spaces within it. Third is that territorial reinforcement. These are the physical attributes and how we express ownership. As you'll see through some of the pictures that we have on some of the slides, there's buildings that actually express a lot of great ownership. Spring Street and their kind of roundabout is a great example of territorial reinforcement and their expression that this is Spring Street, everybody's included. That is how you want to show who should be here, who shouldn't, what is tolerated, and what is not in your communities. And last but not least on our CPTED guidelines here and how we look at things is, if we implement everything, we put all the nice things out, is how do we maintain them? Because we can spend one-time funds to put things out there, but if we actually can't maintain them, that's an actual expression of ownership. Dilapidated buildings tend to bring actual crime and other activity, and so maintaining our buildings in a certain way is just as important. I'm now going to dive into the large and overarching findings for the committee here and for those folks that are watching. And we're going to start with our policies, plans, and procedures. And we structured the presentation in this way because this is the data chunks that you were able to provide inside the report. You'll see on your dais is that everything is provided in the same manner, and then at the building specific level and some district-wide recommendations. So in our policies, plans, and procedures, 2 main standout items that we want to make sure everybody hears and sees is that the implementation of the standard response protocol and the standard reunification method are the industry best practice. You are ahead in all intents and purposes of what you see your peers You actually see, for example, in my home state of Virginia, the state just adopted that and is now just rolling that out to schools, and it'll be a mandate for all schools in Virginia statewide, not until next year. So that adoption is way ahead of what your peers are, and it's both for the standard reunification protocol and standard reunification method. The next two items also correlate to each other. You've got really great building medical emergency plans and how we support our students who may be having a medical emergency or a minor triage issue, and use of our staff, not only our school nurses, but other staff as well who are provided with CPR and first aid training, and how do we engage in evacuations and the counting for individuals outside the buildings. We'll provide you with some fast facts on each of the finding pages or slides here that just give you some of the stuff that I'm talking about and some other things to ponder and think about. Some of the areas for improvement around our plans, policies, and procedures are really just fine-tuning what you already existing have in place. You've got a lot at the boots on the ground level. We would recommend that you start considering and how you engage at the management level and documenting already practices that you have, and that there really is a lot of good work that's already been done in that area, and it's just how you fine-tune it, document it, and then train on it. Our next bucket here were our interviews and our survey data. Number one, by far, is the investment that the district has made and the town has made in the creation of sense of belonging. What we see in terms of hostile events or active assailant events at schools, that's our gunmen, our knives, our vehicles that have been used as weapons, is that there's always a stressor involving relationships with peers, adults, or romantic relationships. That sense of belonging that you've created allows you to engage in behavior patterning and to be able to really support folks and de-escalate before that gets to a violent point. And so that's really commendable, and it's a huge strength that you've been able to invest in that. Next is your collaboration with public safety partners. It is probably one of the biggest top-notch ones that we've seen in doing all of our audits. So it's definitely an item that you should pat yourselves on the back for, is the collaboration that you have, not only with your SROs who are specifically in the buildings, but with the fire department and the command staff across both agencies. Next is specifically your coordination. How do you coordinate with those folks? Having shared systems, having radio channels, all of these things came up in consistently throughout their interviews, along with separately with interviews with building principals and folks that are actually engaging in that. The coordination that's done between the two entities is of utmost importance. We know that collaboration and coordination help educational outcomes. It actually also helps us reduce the impact of emergencies because it speeds up our ability to make decisions and get resources where they need to be to mitigate the individual impacts. And last but not least was the sense of ownership. So all of our buildings felt like they had this great sense of community. They love their building. They own their problems. They own their strengths. And they figured out how to dig deep and figure out with their partners how to make adjustments where necessary and where appropriate to make your buildings better and safer. Well, I'll say here on the areas for improvement, again, similar to our policies and procedures, a lot of things that you have in place, a lot of things that you're supporting your students with special needs, for example, and being proactive in their preparedness, really just fine-tuning, getting that documented, getting that practice into place, and being consistent. Typically what we see, and this is not specific to Shrewsbury, but it's across the board, is that folks implement great practices. They forget to write it down, and once that person who implemented it leaves, well, the practice stops. And so we want to make sure that those practices that you've implemented actually continue moving forward because they are great practices. Last but not least, on our site assessment bucket here, the implementation of district-wide security and safety technology is very commendable. The implementation of the Telecenter U product from Rollin and being able to digitally activate alarms, push of a button, swipe of an app, the implementation of extensive camera coverage to be able to go back, rewind, figure out what happened, also provide a visual deterrent in the natural surveillance. Great use of technology. Next is our secure building entries, the use of our AI phones, making sure that our buildings are kind of like a little castle the outside of our building as our little moat, being able to protect the inside of the castle with our most valuable assets being our students and our staff, and entry and keeping folks out until we've been able to vet them is also commendable and a strength. Came up in interviews, but also came up in our site assessments, is the common radio infrastructure that you have with the town, being able to communicate with them, testing that on a regular basis. You see a lot of times the implementation of technology and equipment, and then the training and everything lags behind that or doesn't occur at all. And so you've actually committed to the investment in the actual use of the technology that you've implemented. You've got some door hardware and access in terms of your areas for improvement that the town has already committed before our audit report. That is both a strength that they identified it before we got here, and also an area for improvement, and just kind of completing that particular project that we wanted to make sure. And last but not least, not anything that is of consequence and not anything that is abnormal to you, but our storage of combustibles. That's all of our decorations and everything. We want our schools to have a sense of belonging, a sense of ownership, and you've got a lot of old facilities that do not have safety features and then like sprinklers. And so making sure that there's a striked balance in between that sense of ownership and that combustible storage is the other area for improvement that we identified on the site assessments. I will mention some of our fast facts here just for those that are watching and for the committee itself. Things to think about and on your radar: 70% of school districts in 22 saw cybersecurity incidents, so that is not something that's going away. The implementation of one-to-one devices, more and more ed tech, you're starting to see more and more opportunities. So really kind of being critical about how you do that in the future will help you now. Your lighting, being able to look at that, making sure we don't disturb our neighbors, but also making sure we can see what's going on in our buildings, both during the day and at night. And our first responder signage here on our fast facts is a common operating picture. I do know that the town has already committed to doing that and putting that signage up. That would be extremely helpful, not only for your staff knowing which door potentially an eloper ran out, and having that common operating picture during an emergency with first responders saying they're coming in this door to support staff is important. That's another fast fact that we mentioned here. Overall, the message that we want folks to kind of take away is that you're in a really great place. You're at this pivotal moment where you need to capitalize on all the great things that you've been doing and really get them written down so it keeps you in that same trajectory of where you're going, which is for greatness in this arena. So it was a really great pleasure to work with Dr. Sawyer and all of his staff in the buildings and all the town staff as well during the interviews and kind of gathering the data. I can't say enough how much we appreciated Mr. Girardi kind of being at our beck and call to make sure we got everything we needed to provide you with the report tonight. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks and yield the time back for questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sawyer.
Just to, for people watching know, thank you for the presentation and the report. And for those watching, we actually held an executive session at 6 p.m. That our partners from both the police department, fire department, members of the select board, town manager, members of assistant town manager, and head of DPW, which I think illustrated the partnership that you highlighted, Mr. Pope, that in terms of what's been, what is a real strength. And I know that going to any conference I've gone to in the last 10 plus years since the Sandy Hook tragedy, the first thing people say is most important is that collaboration between public safety and the school department. The reason we had an executive session is that we have a very detailed report that is actually not a public document. One of the reasons that is applied from the public records laws, there's certain types of documents that they have to do with school security, organizational security, that is not subject to public disclosure for obvious reasons. And some of the specifics you provided in the executive session, and I know the school committee knows this, but for those watching, this might seem like a more high-level, broad conversation, and that's done purposely because there are elements, obviously, that we wouldn't be disclosing or sharing publicly. But at the same time, overall, it's a good news story. We have a lot of strengths, and we have some pretty clear areas where we can continue to build on that and to improve, but no glaring issues where it's like, stop right now, you need to do X, Y, or Z. Is that a fair
Absolutely.
assessment? And yeah,
100%. That is kind of the story we would hope, or the one line is that you're doing great things. Capitalize on that, formalize some things, enhance some things, but really capitalize on all your strengths because you are doing some really great things.
Great. Any questions or comments?
I mean, just one quick comment. I just want to point out that it was only a few meetings ago that we adopted a strategic plan for the district that really focused in on the issue of belonging in particular. And so while we, as a school committee, aren't responsible for our buildings per se, and that's all the partnership with the other individuals that Dr. Sawyer mentioned, making our buildings inclusive, making sure that students feel like they have an adult they can connect with, that they are self-reporting, they're feeling responding favorably to the questions around belonging is something we've already identified as goals. We've put lots of things in place, lots of thoughts over the last few years about how to support some of our most vulnerable students and make sure their needs are attended to. So I think there's, to your point, Dr. Sawyer, just sort of echoing on what people traditionally think of as safety and security, and a somewhat softer but equally as critical point. I think there's an awfully good news story in here for us and the direction that we're going. So thank you for all of your time and effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think when we talked about this last year, we were thinking of the budget and getting a consultant, and we felt it was very important to do that because we might be able to look at it in our own bubble, but we want to make sure that it's that second set of eyes coming in and looking at it critically and not so close to it, I think is extremely beneficial, and this report reflects that. And I think we're very fortunate to have a great relationship between the schools and the town side, and you saw that played out as we went
Absolutely.
through this. And again, we still had that second set of eyes to come in and assess it, which was very good. What else did I have? I think, as Dr. Sawyer said, we did have an executive session before, so a lot of our questions may have been answered during that. It was almost an hour long with a lot of questions from everybody in attendance.
Right.
So anything else? Nope, but again, good news story.
Yep.
We have work to do. We'll keep,
Absolutely.
because security, over the years has changed tremendously since most of us were in school. And these are things that we didn't even think of happening when we were in school. So we want to make sure that we're diligent, but we're also doing it appropriately. And we have to also look at a budget. That is something that, as a school committee, we always have to do. So, but thank you. Dr. Sawyer?
thank you, and just appreciate those comments, and thanks for the engagement of the school committee in the work and the executive session. I do want to thank Mr. Girardi for his work to shepherd this whole thing through. This was his first RFP in his new role, and it was very successful. I also want to thank his predecessor, Mr. Patrick Collins, who last year really brought this forward as an idea, to put in the budget for this year. And I think it's played out exactly how as we had hoped. And when you do an RFP and you're doing this in the public sector, you don't, you're subject to who is, it's not purely the type of RFP we did low bid, but that's part of it, but also the quality of their response to what you're looking for. And it was pretty clear cut why the Olson Group was the successful bidder. And our experience with the Olson Group has been outstanding from start to finish, very professional, very knowledgeable, and very collaborative in terms of working with them. It's been a pleasure. And so, both Mr. Pope, Mr. Petrosky, the rest of the team, and please send back, our regards of how pleased we were with the process. And we have documentation that's going to help us get better at something that's more important than anything we do, and that's keeping our students and our staff safe in our school facilities. So thank you, and we really appreciate the work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Safe trip back to
Good night.
Virginia.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll let them pack up before we move along. Don't drop anything, we'll keep it. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda, we are going to have a update on our literacy program around personnel and process update. And today we have with us Ms. Amy Clowder. She's the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, along with Ms. Kristen Osborne. She's our literacy consultant from Mass Tiered Literacy Initiative, as well as all of our new reading specialists. So once you're all seated,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, one more. No, it's just a water bottle. Yeah, sure. Okay. I can't tell you how excited I am.
yeah, we're excited too.
I know it's supposed to be a quick update, but it's going to be hard with such good company.
That's all right.
And we'll have some time for questions at the end. But I just wanted to start by introducing the team. Okay.
Ready.
So, you already know me. I'm gonna just have them introduce themselves, and then we'll launch our presentation.
I'm Kristen Osborne, working as a literacy consultant.
Hi, I'm Maureen Henry. I'm the reading specialist for Coolidge.
I'm Heather Mistretta, reading specialist at Beal and Spring.
Susan Dorenzo, reading specialist at Sherwood.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Colleran. I'm the reading specialist at Floral and Patton.
Hi, I'm Kristen Sayeg, literacy tutor at Patton.
And just as we proceed, because Ms. Clutter's a little further away from the microphone, you're going to have to really use your principal voice from
Okay.
and project to make sure that they're picking you up on the TV feed.
So we've talked before about how our strength really is in our people, and we have a really terrific team here. So we have people who are representative of the Shrewsbury Public Schools, but I want to point out that Kristen is consulting as part of a grant and giving us technical assistance, and also having, because of your generosity and advocacy in the budget, additional time with her so that we have about 3 days a week of consultant support. And so together, we've been able to accomplish quite a few things, and we're excited to tell you about that tonight. I also want to say that behind every one of these women is a team of tutors, and so you can see the caseloads and the tutor hours by school. One of the things that kind of comes up as a natural question is, so we see the hours and the number of people, but are the hours divided by student need? In other words, are the students who need the most intensive support getting the same kind of group sizes and the same kind of intensive support that they would require, you know, irregardless of kind of how many tutor hours we have by building? And this part of the contribution of this team is really to look at how we identify students that need reading support, and then how we ensure consistency of providing that quality of support. So I can assure you that definitely we have the highest need students in the lowest number of groups across the district, and this group consults regularly to make sure that that's the case. I also want to just thank Kristen Sayeg, who's a tutor, to represent that tutor voice. We have a number of former teachers, reading passionate specialists, and other people who have joined us to kind of contribute to the expertise. So we think about a tutor, I want you to think about somebody who's been trained and working with really strong evidence-based materials as well. I hope that this looks familiar to you. This is the vision for literacy that we crafted together with the Literacy Council. And this team contributes to realizing that vision in two powerful ways. So we'll talk about kind of their student-facing work. Am I doing okay with my volume, Joe?
It's on the TV, so they should.
Okay.
Liz would have to tell you, but the louder the better, I think.
Okay, so there's the student-facing piece of it, and then there's the staff-facing support that they provide around literacy. And so we're going to start by thinking about the student information, and then we'll pivot to talk a little bit about how we're building kind of a communal approach to looking at data and growing our capacity with the staff. So what do our reading specialists do? This list is way too long for me to read out loud, especially in my principal voice. But I think the key thing here is to say that our reading specialists are subject matter experts. So we talked about during the MCAS presentation that regular checkups are really important for people. And if we extended the metaphor, sometimes when we get test results and your GP can't interpret them, they call in a specialist. These are our specialists when it comes to reading. So when we're looking at a student who's struggling and we're trying to think of, there seem to be multiple areas where somebody is, experiencing barriers, what's the very next best thing we can do? This is where that team brings their lens. And so These are our literacy specialists, and each of them is a licensed professional with years of experience. I want to stress again how thankful I am that you recognize the value of their collective experience in the district, because I know often when we come to staffing, we're thinking of hiring people who are new to the field. This is a role where the experience has been really important. And so individually and collectively, they have real deep knowledge of the science of reading, and thus the ability not only to help with students, but also to coach colleagues. And their consultation with our generalist instructional coaches has been really valuable. So now I'm going to turn it over, hopefully, more to them, and start off with Maureen, who's going to give you a snapshot of our data for grades 1 to 4.
So this slide shows the data from the fall. And so students were recommended for reading support based on the fall screening data. Based off of that, sometimes we would go and we would dig a little bit deeper. And so using that data, we could identify what level of support students need. And so some students were able to receive interventions in their classroom. Some students needed tutor support. Some students needed more intensive support, which might be with a reading specialist or also with the tutor. We would look at our students and look at their data, and we would plan out a program for them based on their data. So looking at a student with a greater academic need would receive intervention more frequently. A student also might be in a smaller group, so they might be one-on-one, they might be in a very small group of 2, compared to a student who doesn't have as much academic need, might be seen fewer times a week or in a larger group. And so we just make sure that we're looking at our data so that we can adjust students' programs as needed, which Heather is going to now transition and talk about that.
So I think I have the best slide, but this is very recent data. So we've just gone through kind of a check-in with the teachers. We call it a progress monitoring check-in. And so this is our December data. This is for elementary, again, grades 1 through 4. I think the best news, the best thing to think about is that we've seen decreases in every area. If you look at our chart here, anywhere between 10 to 14% fewer students. And if we were to dig a little deeper, we would see that's across the grade levels and across all buildings. We have seen that trend. And of course, this is a single snapshot. We're going to look at data over time, but I think it's something to celebrate, that early into this, we've seen some measurable improvement and what we were hoping to see. Yeah, and I think we'll pass it to the next person about kindergarten.
So in kindergarten, our support looks a little bit different because, as you know, all kindergartners are working on their early foundational skills. So we're not, yet taking students out of the classrooms. So at this time, tutors are going into classrooms to support kindergarten students. We had kindergarten data meetings about a month ago, and at those data meetings, we did review beginning of year data and flagged students who do need additional support. And you can see the percentage of kindergarten students at each elementary school that we have identified as needing additional support. And what I love about this slide is how consistent we are across all of the schools, and it really shows how much we work together and how we really are creating protocols and trying to be as in sync as possible.
Looking at the snapshot of the grades 5-6 data from the fall, we followed a very similar process to identifying students, and we provided support based on their area of need. So in the classroom, teachers are supporting those students that we found their area of need was in comprehension. Our classroom teachers and tutors are supporting students that we found the area of need was fluency, and within that instruction, we are also focusing on comprehension. And then as the reading specialist, I identified the students that had foundational reading skills that they needed filled in. Students that still needed letter sound correspondence and one-syllable word reading. And then within that, we also focus on fluency and comprehension. When we look at our winter data, you're going to see that our trends are moving, that our students are moving from needing that fluency. They've mastered that, and they're now moving into needing the comprehension instruction. So the overall number of students still need support, but the focus area has changed.
I think it's also worth kind of talking a little bit about how the middle school model is different. You'll recall from that first slide that we have one tutor at Sherwood and one reading specialist in Susan, really lucky. They have an academic focus block. So in addition to classroom support that an individual team might provide, there's a common time where team teachers are also part of intervention. Is there anything else about middle level that we should add?
No, I think that's everything.
We're talking about supporting the students. The consistent data cycles ensures that all the students who need the support will receive it. And the district-wide assessments is a really great way that we can all stay unified. Everyone has the same data that they're collecting. Everyone can interpret what they need. Then we are able to make groups for students according to their needs. We can progress monitor them and adjust the groups as we go along as needs are met, new goals can be made. And with this consistent assessments going on consistently, we're able to see what the students need and address them.
So we've talked a lot about the ways that our reading specialists are supporting students. I think it's also really important to speak to how they're supporting staff, starting with the fact that our tutors now have a supervisor for each of the buildings that can have the capacity to meet with them more frequently and also problem solve. Maureen was fantastic. But it's really great to have more Marines. And so I'm sure from a tutor perspective, being able to look at those numbers and being able to kind of think about what they need to do as they're making their shift in their practice is also really helpful. But the biggest thing I think they've contributed is supporting kind of the data culture and fostering a sense of how we periodically screen students to see what their skill levels are at. And then we just talked about the December data being, what are the numbers we've seen from progress monitoring for this first cycle? So we identified students that needed support, and we provided 6 to 8 weeks of support, and then we stopped to see what does the data show about those students as the end of that support. And you can see it's a good news story. We screened for the next time in January. That doesn't mean that we're going to stop working with students from now until January, but it gives you a sense of we see how the impact on students is progressing, and then we shift our focus and screen again. So having those conversations with grade level teams, supporting teachers and thinking about what the data means, and then also interpreting data. You know, this student, for example, is showing up with really poor spelling, but they seem to read fluently. What's going on? Well, they've memorized a lot of words, and when they start progressing to the middle level, that's going to break down a little bit for them because you can't memorize all the words that you might see in a middle level text. But the foundational spelling piece indicates that there's some gaps we need to close. And that's something that we've been able to talk about. I mean, that's one example, but there's lots of different examples like that where a team is saying, you know, I'm not really clear. This kid never seemed to struggle before. Why are we flagging this student? And it's been helpful to have kind of an expert panel to kind of debrief them.
So along with the K through 6, we've also expanded it to 7th and 8th, looking at their data as well. So in 7th and 8th, there is no reading specialist, so we have Lisa Daly and Pam Poitras supporting students that need some of that phonics work, that tier 3 work there. So in 7th and 8th grade, we wanted to be consistent with the data cycles, but the STAR universal screener that we use doesn't have the same type of assessment for 7th and 8th grade. So we're using a very similar assessment called DIBBLES, but we wanted to make sure the way we were tracking students was consistent. So we wanted to make sure we were looking at the 7th and 8th grade data the same. So Jeffrey Thayer had created a graph for us to make it consistent with how STAR kind of inputs the data and shows us what's happening. He was able to do this with the DIBBLES data, so now we can track the 7th and 8th grade students the same way.
So within the reading specialist and tutor team, we have kind of an internal team looking at how we might improve processes. Kristen's perspective is really helpful from an outside perspective, thinking about improving processes. I wanted to first kind of pause to get a student perspective. We don't have students here, but we have a great student perspective to share, because you can imagine being identified for reading support is not necessarily what you're looking for as a student, particularly at the middle level. And it's been really gratifying to see that students can recognize the investment of their effort and how that's paying dividends for them. So Susan would be probably too humble to share this story. It was kind of like a moment, but I really want you to tell it.
Absolutely. I have a student that, as Amy said, a little reluctant to have to come to reading class. She always participated, not a behavior, just you could see she felt uncomfortable. And throughout the weeks, just the last week or the week before, she stopped me in the middle of class. She goes, "Hey, Mrs. Dorenzo, I'm really starting to like your class. You want to know why? I chose to read in front of my class the other day, and I felt less nervous and more fluent." And those were her exact words. So she's understanding why she's coming to this class to increase her fluency, knows what it means, knows what it looks like, and now she knows how it feels to start making that progress. So it's just, I have several stories like that, but that was, especially at middle school, it's such a joy to share that.
So we anticipated that we would be able to see kind of the value of that effect of seeing improvement and growth, fostering the next data cycle with staff. I think one of the things that's been a nice benefit is that tracking this in STAR platforms means that students and families can also see that progress. So some of our observations from trimester 1 are we're seeing positive change, especially when we're able to provide support in the early grades when the gaps we have to close are smaller. All educators, K to 8, are kind of on the same page when it comes to assessing student skills and, most importantly, like kind of monitoring progress. There are no kids that are slipping through the cracks, so to speak. And I think that as we've changed practices in literacy, it's had a ripple effect on kind of the way we update parents about progress at conferences, the way we communicate a report card. That's both a positive thing and also another change piece to grapple with, because systems are changing. I have to say and give our teachers a lot of credit for the fact that they're doing a lot of learning. And it's hard if you're an experienced teacher to grapple with the learning that you're doing, but I hope that if they're watching tonight, they feel really gratified by the progress their students are making because of their efforts. So here we have just the reading specialist team, but behind the reading specialist team are all our classroom teachers who are also playing an important role in that classroom intervention and support. And emerging needs that we're looking ahead to in trimester 2. We built the data cycle on paper. We didn't necessarily think about how hard it would be in a big school like Beal or Floral to talk about as many kids in this short amount of time, because our grade level meetings, even if we extended them, we've got more kids to talk about in bigger schools. So thinking about how we do that more nimbly is something that we're grappling with. It takes time to grow new practices, and that's true for teachers and for district leaders. So while we're gratified by the progress that we've seen, we know we have more work to do yet, particularly when it comes to responding to the needs of English learners, because we're seeing higher numbers of students entering with language needs as well as literacy needs, and those things are similar but not the same. And when we have students who are identified for English language support, and also students with disabilities, trying to think about how to prioritize and integrate interventions so that students feel still a sense of belonging and are present with their peers is also a challenge. And I mentioned also that students who appear to read well but have spelling challenges, it's meant that we've implemented more progress monitoring tools related to spelling, just to see, are there ways that we can look at student writing as an indicator of future gaps? But I also want to, point out that we have Lisa and Pam Poitras at Oak who are playing the role of reading specialists and supporting the students there. We have about 21% of students at Oak who benefit from reading support. Smaller numbers in terms of intensive support, but that's still something that's, I've asked Kristen in the past, would we need a reading specialist at Oak? Her perspective is we really shouldn't need a reading specialist at that level, but we do have kids who need support right now. So while we're working through this change in interim, we need to think about whether we have additional tutor hours at the upper level. So those are.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Lindsay?
Yeah, I'm really lovely to have you all here. Very, very excited about this growth for our district as a whole. Ms. Clouder has spent a fair bit of time with me on this topic, and I'm pretty passionate about it. So I'm really, really excited also to be at this place. Can you help both explain for me, but also for the parents and people who are listening? You use the term assessment and you use the term screener, and those are really specific, and I don't think people understand. So I understand, and now I'm getting myself a little confused as I sit here. We're using STAR data as an assessment tool 3 times a year. And then I just heard you say we had our fall data, and then we had our December data. We're very excited. December data, yay, wonderful. But then we're doing a screening in January, and so I'm like, is that the same sort of 20-ish minutes that we've sort of talked to parents about? And data went home to parents. I've looked at mine. I pulled it up while we were sitting here. What's the difference between the two? What do they tell you? How do you use those differently, and sort of make understand what parents would see and what they maybe wouldn't see, but are important things that are going on behind the scenes? And that's to anybody. I don't know.
So 3 times a year, we do a universal screener. So there's one computer-based assessment that all K through 6 students, or K through 8, excuse me, do. That's online. Then we also have...
Is it STAR?
STAR.
Yes. Also,
yes.
okay, thank you.
So then there's also STAR CBMs, which are curriculum-based measures, which are for students, we do K through 4. And what that is there's different assessments that we do. We do a letter, it depends on the grade level, like a letter naming, we do a nonsense word fluency, and we do an oral reading fluency. In a phoneme seg. So again, it depends on the grade level. So those happen 3 times a year. But then, just like when you go to a doctor, we all get screened, like our blood work gets taken. If we see something we kind of need to go in deeper, then we do a diagnostic. So we have like a quick phonics screener that we use on students, or a the PASS, which is a phonological awareness assessment, to kind of dig deeper to see where students are.
And when you mentioned, if I can, sorry, when you mentioned using dibbles at Oak, which of those buckets does it fall into, and how do people sort of understand that the chart's important to you? It's important data, but I'm not sure people get why that matters, because I think you're trying to draw a through line between different assessment tools. Am I getting that right?
Yeah,
screening
so
tools?
The Oak dibbles is more of, we don't do that with all students. From the STAR Universal Screener data, we take a look at that and we determine what students might need to have the oral reading fluency, which is the dibbles, to see if there's a fluency, matter we need to kind of firm up, or if there's some sort of phonics issue we need to dig deeper with. So the dibbles we use, which is the same as the STAR CBM oral reading fluency, it's just they don't have it at STAR.
Can I ask one more?
Of course.
Sorry.
Can I close the loop first?
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
we identify what the pressing need is. We use the curriculum-based measures or the dibbles, depending on what level you're at, to track kind of how are students progressing in that specific need. At the next screening window, we see how do they apply what they've learned about those discrete skills in the next screener, which is more general. Hopefully, in the parent report, like that you got, you're looking at the different colors, we see movement either within the band of the color or in a different color. So the screener is a helpful progress monitoring tool, and then also diagnostic tool for thinking about, of all the things we need to fix, what is it we most need to we're going to start with letter naming for a kid that doesn't know their letters. But if you got all your letters, then you're going to work on your phoneme segmentation and your sounds. If a kid is showing up with different needs, we can pinpoint those needs with the diagnostics or the curriculum-based measures. We want to see in the next screening, are they using that experience of support outside when they're approaching the next screening assessment, which is more general.
That's helpful. Thank you very, very much. I think seeing the progress for our first to fourth grade students and seeing a clear decrease in the total number of students that need some level of support at this different intervention is, of course, very, very exciting. And seeing our middle school, particularly 5th through 8th, sort of move in the bands but the total number of kids doesn't move. I recognize there's only 2 data points. Kids are complex. There's a lot we're trying to do in a really short amount of time, and we all want to see progress way too fast, right? And so that notwithstanding, I think for us, this is more common for my colleagues, are thinking about, we're entering budget cycle. We're about to start conversations, like what data will we have to kind of ask ourselves the question of, do we have enough support at the middle school level? And does that need to look a little different? And I'm even putting 7th and 8th in a different bucket, because maybe long-term we don't, but short-term we do as we transition. But I'm trying to understand if you all think a good metric to track is the total number of kids as a percentage of the student body. It looks like it's, it's very consistent, 44 and 44 and 46 and 46. And so, and I know that's gonna take some time, but is that a good way for us to know that the total number of kids are doing better, and a way to kind of start to think about that, Ms. Clouder, for us, of like how other kind of interventions we might need? If that dial isn't moving, and it's moving in some ways that are really important, I'm not denying that, but like, we still have a lot of kids who need almost 50%, right? That's a big number. And so if we see that number sort of consistent in another cycle, that makes me think maybe we need more there. But I don't know that I know enough to, am I interpreting that correctly?
So I think that we've all wrestled with that question, particularly when we're looking at students that need foundational skill support and need it kind of at the intensive level.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the middle school model and you're looking at the 3 buckets of support, the metric to focus on are the kids getting support in foundational reading, the tutor and Susan's work. Because the classroom support piece, that's being provided by the teams and the teachers. Adding staff to that is like.
Got it.
So
Okay.
I think it's looking at those numbers for tutor and reading specialist support. And I would defer to Susan thinking, could you use another person?
Yes. So when
But it is, we do have just one data point at this point, but I think
Yeah.
Susan's the best person to answer that question.
But to speak to what Amy was saying, looking at what the reading specialist, the numbers, the percentage that needs support from the reading specialist, when those numbers aren't changing, it's usually you want to change the intensity. So the way you change that intensity is the amount of time they get instruction or the size of the group. And the flexibility to change time isn't always there. And if the staff isn't there to make a smaller group, because there's the same number of kids, that's where the problem could arise. And that's the information you want to look at, is that students that need the most intensive instruction, can we make it more intense for them?
Okay. Thank you. Erin.
I wanted to thank you. This report is extremely helpful, and it's so great to put the faces with the names for all of us. I think maybe it would be helpful for us and for the people at home, just like, what does this look like for the kids, like on a day-to-day? Like, do you pull them out of class? Do you meet with them in a small group? Or I'm sure it differs based on a child's needs, but kind of like, how often are you meeting with most students? Like, is it once a week they get an hour, or is it more frequent? Like, if you could just kind of give us like a little bit of an overview of what that looks like.
Sure. I can answer that question. So most of our students who are receiving intervention outside of the classroom are receiving that maybe 4 to 5 times per week on average. There may be some exceptions. And typically, we are scheduling them for 30-minute blocks. At the highest level of intensity, the group sizes are range between like 1 and 3 students. And at that middle level of intensity, they might range between 3 and 5 students. And we have a pretty similar structure that we've worked on, to make sure that the students all have a similar type of lesson, but often might start with a sound warm-up, helping students hear the individual sounds within words. There may be some sort of letter sound drill where you're showing them the different either letters, or maybe for older students, spelling patterns, and having them quickly name the sounds that they make. And then we go into reading words, spelling words, and that can be anything from a small short word to a multisyllabic word, and how to attack that. There might be some dictation, like sentence dictation, that matches whatever phonics skill the students are working on. And then there may be some reading of decodable text, so text that matches the phonics skill that they are working on, and working on their fluency. Now, obviously, the lesson would vary definitely varies depending on the student's needs. Some students may spend most of their time on letters and sounds and the sounds within words. Some students might spend most of the time focusing on their fluency, but that's kind of generally the structure of our lessons. Just the skill increases in intensity, and we do try to use a lot of the same language and activities that they would be using during their phonics block within the classroom. So it feels very familiar to them. They know the routines, they know the language, they know the procedures. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So at the middle level, it does look a little bit different. The phonics instruction has the very similar structure with letter name sounds and putting them into words and then going to multisyllable words. But our students that need fluency intervention are given a grade level passage to work with. So they're working with complex text with support. So the teacher is guiding them identify words that they don't know how to decode. They decode them so that they know all the words in the passage. Then they're reading it together so they can hear what it should sound like when a grade level text is read fluently. Then they're working with a partner so they have practice with that reading fluency. And that passage is used 4 times so they can continue to make growth and practice with that. And then within that system, we're also talking about the vocabulary that goes along with the passage that they're reading.
Thank you.
That's Rachel.
I'm so glad to see this. I'm glad that our numbers have gone down, which means our literacy has gone up. So as students are moving through the literacy program, are they, and I'm assuming that this is fluid and they may start with one of you and then they graduate onto classroom support or their tutors. As kids move through the system, how is that their progress being relayed back to families? Are we doing like a check-in, or is this something like once the report card comes out, we'll say, this is where your student is now, or is there a phone call that says, hey, great news, we're progressing, and this is where we are?
So this would be a good time to talk about the progress report.
Sure. Do you want me to? I'll take that
Sure.
one. Yes, so parent communication is definitely important, and we're working together to make sure we're in alignment and doing the same thing across all of the elementary schools. We have the classroom teachers at the very beginning. The classroom teachers will be the ones to reach out to the parents if the students were in need of support, because we feel like that's our first step. After that, they're given a letter and kind of a parent form. Permission form for any students who are being pulled out for that intervention. We're also, our emails and our contact information is available at any time, and I know we've all had parents reach out to us, so we're here if they have any questions. We also have progress reports that we'll be sending out, and those align with the report cards, so it'll be at that time. I think we're also, everyone is sending home, for example, word lists or decodable books or things like that. So there's things going, home as well, so that parents can kind of know, what we're working on, the phonics skills the kids might be working on.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, as students might transition over to classroom support, we'll just let the parents know that we'll continue to keep an eye on them and continue to monitor them, so that if it looks like they need more intensive support, that they would just seamlessly transition back over.
But I've also had instances where I've had to increase the intensity of a student's intervention. So I've also, we obviously, anytime any intervention is adjusted, we contact the parents. And I just want to add that the progress report tells the parent whether or not they met their goal, and if not, what our next steps are for the student.
In terms of the STAR report, we felt it was important for teachers to talk directly to parents and give them hard copies where that was possible. Mm-hmm. The next iteration is to kind of work on an electronic form. We tried that out for the first time at the middle level with kind of mixed results. It didn't always port over perfectly, and we had a few families that got that reached out for clarification. But I'm hoping that by the time our January cycle is wrapped up, we'll have a form that can be sent out electronically that updates parents about what does the STAR reading and math score look like for the second screening cycle.
John.
I want to first off thank you all for being here. Thank you for the report. I'm really appreciative of having your expertise in our district, and I'm especially appreciative of the recurring reporting that we're getting on this initiative. Ms. Clowder had provided us with an overview during our October 25th meeting that gave us, just a kind of a broad understanding of the program, of, just the personnel involved. And I really felt that was helpful to, not just for me, but for the public to understand how big an effort this is. And today we learned about reading specialists and data cycles and the importance of, the assessments. It's a heavy lift, right? And I agree with Ms. Heffernan. Anytime you put funding behind resources, you hire the resources the next day, whether it's public or private, they're looking for instant results. And I think it's important for the public to understand this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? We need the time to make sure that we're doing right by our students. I think it's just evidence of that. So I appreciate all that you're doing around this initiative. And I think, I appreciate the recognition around the school committee prioritizing this. At the same time, I think about the priority that our residents, that the town has put into education and all services in general. They gave us the flexibility and the predictability in our budget to do that. So I want to acknowledge that as well. But thank you all. Appreciate it.
I think in all my years on the committee, this is probably the issue that we were most adamant about during our budget workshops, that we didn't think there was enough money, we didn't think there was enough staff, and push that we wanted to put funding in this area, because we felt if you can't read, you can't do anything else, and you can't comprehend. So I'm just so excited to see this moving, and I know it's a lot of work. Any change is a lot, but like John said, this is a progressive piece, and it will become more commonplace over time. But this is great news already, I think. But again, we want to make sure that we're funding it properly and looking into the next budget cycle. And after listening to MCAS results last week, that was a concern maybe at that 7th grade level. So just looking at all the data-driven information is very helpful for us as we move into the budget cycle. But again, this was probably the key thing from last year's budget that we are really glad to see come to fruition. So thank you for all your work, and the story of a student who's now, I can stand up, because remember you go around the room and you have to read and nobody wanted to do it. Like, to be able to do that and feel comfortable, it just, in the sense of belonging and community and knowing that you're part of everything and you can master this skill is what we want all the kids to have. So thank you for everything that you're doing, and we look forward to the more updates on this.
Sure.
Dr. Sawyer, any comments?
Thank you. This is a great news story. Thank you for the presentation. A couple things that occur to me. First off, kudos to Ms. Clowder for leading this initiative, and even before this year, there's been a lot going on for a long period of time to set us up for this, for where we are right now. And part of that was successfully applying for a grant with the state, with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, that happened to result in some consultant time, and we ended up with a consultant who was a very successful classroom teacher at Coolidge when Amy was the principal there, who happens to be doing that professionally now. And so someone who is very familiar with Shrewsbury and our approach and our culture has been terrific, and Kristen's expertise is extraordinary. I was able to observe her teaching the graduate course that our early adopter teachers received in our summer curriculum program in June. And I've seen her on Zoom with, we do some simultaneous Zoom professional development, and some of our professional development days this fall, our recent early release day just this past Tuesday. So we're really benefiting from her expertise. And again, the additional investment that you approved to not only use the grant funds, but also some of our funds to have her here more frequently and for longer periods of time is paying off for sure. As Ms. Clowder referenced, the fact that you as a school committee supported adding 3 reading specialist positions, but also gave us the budget to go out and hire people with great expertise and experience has been huge. And the mantra for many years, going back to my predecessor, Dr. Bent, and certainly Barb Malone now as Director of HR, and Tom Kennedy before her, the idea that personnel is job one. You can have the positions, but if you don't get great people in them, that doesn't matter a whole lot. But with Vanessa and Susan and Heather, really, we're so fortunate to have hired some really terrific people who have great expertise, but also know how to work well with kids, know how to work really well with the tutors whom they supervise, and to bring reinforcements for Maureen Henry, who's been doing this work for a long time in our district. I had the good fortune to work with Maureen when I was the assistant principal and principal at Floral Street School. And she's been our Title I director. We have a Title I grant that virtually all districts have, that you focus on reading. And she has been leading the charge with training and supporting our tutors in all of our elementary schools for many years, to have this additional support and allow her to focus more intensively on the needs of students at Coolidge. And the tutors there has been tremendous, and but Maureen's expertise has always been appreciated, and to be able to use it more effectively now, even because we have more resources, is really exciting. And Kristen being here representing the tutors, our tutors, as Amy referenced, are really outstanding paraprofessionals who provide an incredibly valuable service. They work really hard, they connect well with kids, they're doing things in a way that's really explicit based on the training they've received, and sometimes that's because they have expertise already, and they're doing this because they want some part-time work, or they don't want the level of, they're qualified to be teachers but are in this particular role. But regardless of that, they're bringing just outstanding work every day into our schools. That's supported by the reading specialists here. And I'll wrap up by saying that, what I think one of the nice things about the reading specialist role, they are members of our district leadership team. They do supervise paraprofessionals. They do not supervise or evaluate our teachers. They're peers, but they're leaders among their peers, just as our instructional coach, curriculum coordinators are. To have that kind of position with expertise that can support the day-to-day work that our classroom teachers are putting into place, and it's been a lot of work and intensive work for our classroom teachers, and to both general educators and special educators to learn some new and different ways to do things. I appreciate the work that they're doing. We're starting to see the payoff already. It's going to be a long period of time to get to where we need to go, but I think we're going to see incremental gains that are exciting and very gratifying. So again, appreciate this is how the system is supposed to work. The school committee advocating for the resources we need with the override a few years ago, budget stability, emphasizing areas strategically where we want to put our time, and having great leaders and educators put it into practice, and ultimately where kids benefit. And it's really an outstanding story, and really want to thank you all for your hard work and your expertise. So thank you.
Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Amy.
Have a good night.
Okay, next on the agenda, we are going to have a summer enrichment program tuition rates report. The summer enrichment program has not increased its teaching stipend in at least 10 years, and the current stipend is out of alignment with similar district stipends. This has negatively impacted the number and type of class proposals that we've received. And tonight we have with us Ms. Karen Isaacson. She's Director of Extended Learning, and she will give us a report on her recommendation. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Well, as you said, we have not increased our teaching stipend for at least a decade. It is currently been at $500 per half-day class, and that really is out of alignment with similar stipends. There's a contract negotiated professional hourly rate of $41.03, I believe, is next year's rate, and that's really not representative of that $500. So to make that change, it will require an increase of fees to the parents to make up the difference in that cost. But we have also not raised the parent fees in that same amount of time at least. I came on board in 2014, these fees were in place, so I'm not sure how many years before that, but that's a good 10 years now. One of the things that I have noticed in looking at the data in the last few years is that the type of proposals we're getting and the number of proposals has really changed. And I just kind of briefly looked at, in 2016, 60% of our proposals were taught by teachers and other professional educators. Just a few years later, in 2019, that had dropped to 50%. This past year was 40%. And I want to go on record as saying the paraprofessionals are running fantastic classes, and it is no disrespect to the great paras who are teaching, but our intention has always been to really promote some of our professional educators to come and teach in the summer. And so I'm looking numbers-wise, seeing this decrease, and then anecdotally hearing from teachers who taught for many years in enrichment, saying to me, can make my money tutoring, I can do it. The stipend is just kind of not worth it at this point. So I'd really love to be able to compensate them at a rate that is then in alignment with that professional hourly wage, and hope to then attract more teachers and then just raise the overall number of proposals. It's been pretty hard to compare data in a post-pandemic world. The last time we ran the full program was 2019, and obviously a lot has changed. But I mean, we went from 337 proposals in the summer of 2019. I only got 211 this past year. A few teachers were teaching summer academy. Some teachers just want their summers off because it's been really stressful after the pandemic. But again, I do think stipend has really played into that. So I'm excited that we, are putting that into alignment with the other stipends. And so as a result, then asking you to approve an increase of the class fee to $100 from $80. I did a quick survey of local other summer programs based on their rates last summer. Again, apples to apples is crazy. I tried to break it down into what would be an hourly rate. Every program runs differently. But our rates really came in at the bottom of that pile. And even by increasing it by that $20 per class, we're still kind of smack in the middle of what other programs are doing. So I think it's a very competitive price. And most other programs don't offer that type of flexibility that ours do, as that a la carte nature of you can pick one class for the whole summer, or you could pick 8 classes. You really can customize it however you want. And I think that adds a lot of value to families. So even families who are using it open to close 4 days a week, they're still getting a great value compared to other camps. So I'm really ready to take questions. They're pretty straightforward.
Sure. Any questions or comments, Erin?
Yeah, so when my recollection is there's the morning session and the afternoon session with the lunch break, correct?
Yes.
If a family chooses to do the morning and afternoon, is the price $100 per session, or is there any type of discount if you do both?
No, it's $100
Okay.
per session, right?
Okay.
And then we supervise them during lunch. They bring lunch from home, but we provide that kind of.
And was there extended care on either end?
There is, yep.
Okay.
We do an early drop-off starting at 7 and extended till 6 for additional fees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm certainly, I think we have as a committee been very focused on fees for parents that are in our traditional purview. We talk a lot about sports fees and bus fees and all these other things, and we've tried very hard to make sure we don't wait too many years because big jumps are unfortunate. We also are contractually look at teacher's stipend in the traditional day or the sports coaches and other such things. That's like always on our radar, and I'm both, first for everyone, very supportive. I've had kids in many of the programs and have had really wonderful experiences there. But the idea that we've gone 10 years without raising the cost is, I would encourage you, stay on us a little bit, because this one isn't on the traditional cycle for us to kind of be paying attention to. And I would hate, I'd love to not raise fees this much at any one point in time. I appreciate it matters to families. It is important. It's still a very good value, a wonderfully run program, and I'd love to see both your number of proposals go up, but I want to see that program be successful. So I hope that we, maybe and it's incumbent upon us as well. Every few years we should look at this and be asking that question, so we don't let quite so long go by.
Great. Yeah. No one else? No, I agree. I think it's something we definitely want to look at, raising our fees to make sure that we are keeping in the market to cover the costs of these programs. And they are these are great values for families, and they're great programs to be in. They're safe, and families can have that, they're confident while they're working in the summer that their children are getting a really great educational or fun experience. And so I have no issue with this whatsoever. I think, yes, it's a $20 increase, but in today's society with cost of living and everything, it's due. It's definitely due. So I'm fully in support. Anything else? Dr. Sawyer, any comments or questions?
I appreciate Ms. Isaacson bringing forward, and since she's come on board as the Director of Extended Learning, and when she did, we expanded the portfolio of this role. It used to be just focused on the Extended School Care Program, but to include summer enrichment, and also Ms. Isaacson founded essentially the vacation enrichment programs that we've had on February and April vacations, and also she's in charge of the what's known as the ASAP after-school programs, which are other kinds of enrichment programs, typically the elementary school as well as our middle school. Certainly noted that we don't want to go so long. I think we try to keep, in this case, we're making it work. It was, and based on the response, financially, it was working for us. It wasn't as if we were on the, and the other nice thing about it, it's self-funding in the sense that if a class doesn't attract enough enrollment, we don't run it. And so we don't incur the expense. Or we may run a few that are a little bit under because we have some that are over-enrolled or higher enrolled, I should say. And so it's been a very healthy program financially, and this is less about the program being healthy, it's more about attracting, more range of educators to offer courses and get more aligned with what, has evolved over time in terms of increases in that rate. So, again, I think it's a great value. I think that, in the context, it's a reasonable expectation for an increase, and I would advocate that you vote yes.
Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion to increase the summer enrichment class fee to $100 per class?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have our minutes from our school committee meeting held on November 29th, 2023. Are there any changes or corrections? There being none, these can be marked as accepted as distributed. And we do need to return to open session this evening for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts general law. Executive session, sorry. It's a long one. We need to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. Purpose 7, Open Meeting Law, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 22FG, for the purpose of reviewing, approving, and/or releasing executive session minutes. And B, for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect of the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Purpose 3, the Shrewsbury Education Association's Units A and or B, the Shrewsbury Paraprofessional Association, and/or the Cafeteria Workers Association, where deliberation in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and we return to open session only for the purpose of adjourning for the evening. May I have a motion we adjourn to executive session?
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote is required. Ms. Shreveport?
Aye.
Mr. Wensky?
Aye.
Ms. Boucher?
Aye.
Ms. Heffernan?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Thank you and good night.